Thanks for listening to the Healthy Church Podcast with Larry Barker and Drew Klein.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us on the Healthy Church Podcast. Larry, it's good to see you, brother. I'm excited to be with you today. What are we talking about?
We're going to talk about something I think we don't talk about enough, and how do we balance ministry and family, and what's that look like? And you know, there's just a lot of dynamics going on there. You're never going to get it totally figured out. At least I don't think you are. You're going to always be working, adapting. And I think you've got to realize that it's just always going to be a challenge.
Even as you say that topic, in my mind, I'm thinking about families that haven't made it, marriages that have broken up. I'm thinking of literally people in my mind, ministers and people I've worked with and known. And it is a very needed topic, so I'm glad we can kind of broach this subject a little more. I know we talk about it some, but I'm glad to kind of get into it today.
Yeah, I was actually listening to a couple of guys talking about it, and I knew that we have some trainings for, you know, the joys and the challenges of ministry. And because here's the one thing I don't want to do. I don't want this to be our whine and crying and we've got it worse than anybody else and type thing, because I think if some of us went out and got some other people's jobs, we'd find out those are hard too. And difficult. Now, I'm not going to underestimate the spiritual warfare, because that's where we're going to start talking. It's real. When you get in to the leadership role of a ministry, you got a bullseye on you. You got to know that, and you got to realize that. And if the devil can get the leader to fall, there's a domino effect there that we unfortunately have seen in Christianity in North America far too much.
Yeah. We were just telling our assistant that she and her husband care for our students, and they've had some difficulty over the last several months, you know, and it's like, man, you're on the front line here. God is doing a work in you, and the enemy is coming after you. So it's definitely a true reality.
Yeah, there's a great quote that I like, that when someone plants a church or leads a church through a difficult situation, that could even be something like, I don't know, replanting, rebranding, and moving your location. You know anybody doing that kind of thing? That
guy would be insane, probably. I would not suggest those things unless the Lord told you to do it, and then go for it, man.
But I got to congratulate you, dude. You now have the building you've dreamed about, prayed about, and it belongs to South City. Amen?
Yeah, and we'll do a special podcast and talk about some of the vision and ideas around that. But I'll say the same thing I said to our people recently, and that is, hey, the church is not a building, it's a people, and this is not the end-all, be-all. This is a tool in the Lord's hand, and we want to see it used as a tool. But the good thing for us is we'll use this space 7 days a week, and I feel really good about that as a steward of the Lord's.
Yeah, I knew you'd have to make that disclaimer, and
That's the reason we're doing it. That's the only reason I can do it and feel good about it.
And I love it, buddy. I do, and we do need to do a separate. But here's why what you've gone through fits. Because there's a great quote. I don't know where I got it from. I've had it a long time. But you get through something like that, and you look back, you go, man, that's the hardest thing I've ever done, and it's the best thing I've ever done. You know, because you were obedient.
Yeah.
You followed God's direction. I can remember a time, Drew, and it was honestly in my first pastorate, and there was a situation, and I literally had to grab the sides of the lectern because my hands were shaking so bad. And I thought, this is going to be the shortest lived pastorate in the history of man. And I was so bad. Before I went up there, I told Shelby, I said, we did save the boxes we moved up here with because we might need them. And it was a theological issue I had to address. And man, I grabbed that pulpit and I was trembling and my voice was quivering. And I spoke what I knew the word taught. and a man in the back said, "Thank you, preacher. We're behind you." And the whole thing turned. It was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. But I look back, it's one of the best things I ever done. And that's that reality. And when you go into ministry, yeah, it's hard, but there's also a lot of blessings. Let's not forget the times that we can shout and praise the Lord. You were doing a little bit on that earlier before we started the recording, because you got the notification that this phase and the vision was becoming reality, and that's exciting. So we want to talk about balance.
Yeah, well, and even as you're saying those things, I'm thinking about when we face those difficult moments and those difficult situations, I'm so very grateful for the support that we have in our wives and in our families. And that's what we're talking about, this balance and tension between the two and where you put your focus and those sort of things. So I'm so grateful. Couldn't do what the Lord has called me to without her, the way she's been so supportive, my wife, my wonderful wife and kids, and I know you feel the same.
Oh, I even feel stronger, and here's why. I don't think anybody would put up with me if it wasn't for Shelby. I think they let me hang out because she's there, and and I'm good with it, dude. You and I both know we way outkicked our coverage when we married. We understand that 100%, and God was very gracious to us. But how are we going to balance our walk with God, our family life, and ministry, and with a biblical balance? And I even know some of the things we'll talk about. Some people will lean a little more one way than the other. I think you're going too far on that one, and others will go, I don't think you're going far enough. And I get it, because we all have to realize every one of our callings is unique. Our location is unique. Our people are unique. And we've got to understand that there's going to be some distinctive differences, but I also think there's some familiar patterns. There are some very distinctively, they're the same, because people are people at heart, and challenges are challenges. But boy, there can be some really tough ones, can't there?
Yeah, and it's a difficult thing to think about your commitment, obviously, to the Lord and your commitment to your family, and trying to determine where does this lie? Where do allegiances lie? How do I? Obviously, the Lord is the Lord, and we need to put nothing up in front of Him. But that gets a little complicated. It's not sometimes as easy as making that determination like that.
Yeah. Well, I like the thing that I heard said about problems, and I've got problems. Well, let me tell you, there's 3 types of people: those who have problems, those coming out of problems, and those about to have some problems. And I just challenge all of us, go read the life of Paul and what he went through. And you and I have talked about this verse before, but it just jumps out at me, being in the ministry, almost my whole life now. And it's where he gives all these things, shipwrecked, beaten, and then he says, and then there's the care of the churches. Yeah. That burden that he carried. And any minister, any leader worth anything has a burden for the people, the sheep, whatever terminology you want to use. They have a burden for those people because they love them.
Yeah, no question. No question. And your spouses carry that same burden even greater sometimes than you do.
They do. That's exactly right. Matter of fact, there's a great thing for all of us to understand. They don't always have to know everything about every situation. And not because we're keeping something from them. And every couple needs to decide, what's healthy for their relationship, and what does each one want to know. And I can remember when I went in the missions office, I thought, man, I want to be in on every meeting. I want to know every detail, and I want to be in the midst of every situation. And I hadn't been in the role very long, and I went, no, I don't need to know everything.
Yeah, right.
I just don't have to. And so I'd be selective, because you're right. Your wife will carry the wound a whole lot deeper than you do if you're not very, very careful, and sour them, towards the ministry. I heard a story just this last week of it sounds like a helpmeet to a pastor that she don't want to be there, and she don't want to be a part of that, and has basically told folks, don't come to me asking for prayer unless you're dying. You hired him, you didn't hire me. This isn't about, don't come to me, you go to him. He's the pastor, not me. And when I hear that, I'm not angry at him. My heart hurts, because there's a pain there. There's a what's the word I'm looking for? There is an offense there that's very, very deep, that's never been dealt with.
Yeah, absolutely. It breaks my heart to hear that.
It does mine too. So, we want to say this: behind every healthy, dynamic church is a healthy leader and a healthy family. We say that, but I'm afraid we give it lip service too much, instead of realizing, and that's why we talk about soul care. You cannot expect a healthy team if you don't have a healthy leader of the team. You can't expect a healthy church if you don't have healthy teams. And I think healthy teams are just benefited that much more by a healthy family.
Yeah.
And Drew, I can tell you this: I've been able to stay in ministry as long as I have because I knew I had a safe haven at home. I knew I could come home and be loved and be understood, and also just a shoulder to cry on, a neck to hug, and being supportive. Now, doesn't mean we haven't. Every couple, every home has its challenges.
Right.
We have too, but I did know she was in my corner.
Yeah.
And that makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, as soon as you were talking about that, Larry, I started thinking some people may hear that and go, oh, gosh, we're not a perfect family. We're far from that. But, I remember studying one time, I think it was Noah. The Bible uses this term for different men and women of God, but blameless, And I remember thinking, gosh, does that mean just he was amazing and you couldn't blame? And it doesn't. What it means is he lived with accountability. That actually means that he wasn't perfect, but as he made mistakes, he dealt with them. And I think that is what is so important for church leaders' wives, pastors' wives, ministry wives, and families. We are not perfect. We're just as messed up as everybody else, but own the mistakes and own the problem and deal with it as it happens. Be blameless in that same regard. We're not trying to be perfect. We're not perfect, but we bring our junk. We bring our stuff, we own our mistakes, and we try to walk them out in honesty and authenticity.
Yeah, I love that, Drew. I think you're exactly right. And we have a saying in the missions office, and again, we're not perfect. We've made many mistakes, and we know it. But you got to own them, and then strive to correct them as best you can and make things right. But we have a statement. As best we know how, we are not going to sacrifice a family on the altar of church planting. We just refuse to do that. And matter of fact, there's 5 knockouts in the old Charles Ridley 13 characteristics of church planting and missionaries, and one of them is spousal cooperation. And I think it's a knockout. If they're not both all in, back away.
Sure.
They both need to be all in, and it doesn't mean they're perfect. Doesn't mean they haven't figured it. They have it all figured out. Doesn't mean they don't have any fears or concerns. It just means, hey, we're in this together. I could probably get teary-eyed remembering, because I can think of several difficult times in the ministry that Shelby looked at me in the eye and she says, "You do know I've got your back, and I'm behind you 100%." Now, buddy, that'll give you the ability to endure and persevere. Hey, we're in this thing together. We're going to make it. We're going to get through this, and just how important that is.
Well, and as important as that is, and that is so important, is there have been times where my wife has said, you're wrong in this.
Yeah.
You know, I think you have I don't think your heart is right in this, or you need to be careful. You need to watch yourself, and it held me accountable to things that are like, wow, every time I take it so serious. I try to, to really refocus what I'm doing and consider that. So yeah, how important are our wives to speak that truth and give us that support? Incredible, like no other.
I'm so glad you brought that up because it works both ways. Mm-hmm. And it reminds me of a time one of my kids came to me and they said, I'm a little upset at you, Dad. I said, what for? I said, you love Mom more than me. I said, that's correct.
You got that right, buddy. Yeah.
What? What do you mean? I said, I knew her before I knew you, buddy. And I'm going to side with her every time. Here's my point. Pastors, leaders, let your church know that too.
Mm-hmm. So good.
Let your church know. I can remember years we were planting, and Shelby was doing a job she didn't want to do. She didn't ask to do. Guess what? I asked her to do it. And so she willing, and we went on a visit, and this individual just wanted to do it. And I said, we're not going to sit here and attack Shelby. Well, I got to tell you, she don't. I said, whoa. No, we're not doing this. Mm-hmm. And, well, why not? I said, because she's doing a job she didn't want that nobody else would do, and I'm the one that asked her to do it for a season. And she never wanted to. She's out of her sweet spot. She's doing the best she can. And unless you're ready to step up to the plate and do this, The conversation's over. Well, I actually had another man in the church with me, and we went out in the van. He said, I've never been prouder of you, Pastor. I said, buddy, I'm going to defend Shelby. I'm gonna stand by her the way she stood by me, and so we need to let those know around us. I don't love this church more than I love my wife.
Mm-hmm.
And I love this church, but I love my wife, and we're in this thing together. And there's a lot of dynamics there we don't have time to go into.
Sure,
it's just something that I always strive to. If you're going to make me choose, I know who I'm choosing.
Right, no doubt, no question.
Absolutely.
About it.
So what we want to talk about a little bit is awareness of a couple things, and then how do we prevent them? It's not enough just to say, but what do we do about it? How do we approach it? And the first one we've already mentioned, spiritual warfare is real.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, the other day, Shelly and I were talking. She goes, I know we've always said we don't always look for a demon behind every door, but I'm not sure one's not showing its ugly head right now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, you can't deny that in that situation. And someone has said that spiritual warfare is kind of like an iceberg. Not only 90% of it is visible. Mm-hmm. Is invisible. I'm sorry. Only 10% is visible because that spiritual iceberg, it's always there. And if we're trying to advance the gospel, that is an assault on the kingdom of Satan. And there's a spiritual dimension there we should not underestimate. Ephesians chapter 6. Mm-hmm. Enough said.
When you think about Jesus' ministry, how often did he deal with demons?
Yep.
I mean, it's almost like every other story is something that deals with the demonic. So those haven't gone away, and they're hiding in certain ways. Yeah,
they sure have. So what's the strategy? I mean, what do you do if you see and I like this terminology, if you see a spiritual stronghold that the enemy has control of? Drew, I even tell church planners and missionaries, if you're going to an area to reclaim what the devil has taken possession of, it's like storming the beaches in a war. And it's all out and out battle, because if he's been in control of a situation, and that can be an area, that can be a town, but that can be a family, or that can be an individual. And when that confrontation comes, he's not going to give up without a fight. Right. And so, number one, make sure your prayer life is where it needs to be, and make sure you have a prayer team that's committed to praying for you and your family.
Yeah, so good.
I remember years ago when I first started doing this, and guys go, well, I'm going to put out a sign-up sheet for everybody on my prayer list. And And I'm for that. I want everybody to hear me. I'm for that. And how many? Oh, wouldn't it be awesome if I had 200 praying for me? And I said, yes, it would. I said, but let me let you think about something. I'd rather have 7 people who will pray for me that day of the week, every single week, than 200 that say they might pray for me.
Right.
I want some prayer warriors that'll say, I've got you on Sunday.
Sure.
I've got you on Monday. And I'm not saying that's the way to do it. I'm just saying find some people that are prayer warriors. They don't talk about prayer, but they really, really pray. And get that prayer team supporting you, behind you, and knowing that they're there for you. I've got a very good friend in Portugal going through a very difficult situation right now. And Shelby and I covenanted to pray for them and I emailed him this morning, said, thinking of you and praying for you. And just his response blessed my soul. Thank you so much. Please don't stop. And it was just cool to see his response. And so realize, hey, a second thing in the area of spiritual warfare, personal holiness is essential. And you're responsible for that, leader. Somebody else is not. Now, you gave a word that all of us need, accountability. And if you're not willing to be accountable, something's wrong. The programs that will even let people know in your life where you've been on the web, if that's what you need, those friends that walk with you. But here's what you got to realize. Because it's spiritual warfare, he plays dirty. He never plays fair. He knows our weaknesses. And if we don't repent of those sins and consecrate ourselves, we're setting ourselves up for even more spiritual attack and damage being done.
Yeah, no question. And again, in the same way, we're not looking for perfect people, just honest, godly people who are going, this is an area I need to work on. I'm struggling with this. I think I think you build incredible trust with those people God has given you to shepherd when you can just be honest and real. They don't expect a perfect person. They want somebody who's honest and authentic.
Drew, a couple of the best words I've ever said to those I lead has been this: I'm sorry. And mean it. Because that speaks volumes. You know what? I blew that. I made a mistake there. I didn't try to, wasn't planning to, but yeah, I messed up there. And just be honest about it. And I think we've built this persona that we think we can never mess up and we can never make a mistake. And I can tell you, eventually that'll cause you to snap.
Sure.
That'll cause you to break, because you can't live that line of perfection. There was only one who did. And by the way, they crucified him.
Yep.
They did. And so we need to remember that.
No doubt. That's good stuff.
Hey, another one is loneliness and isolation. You and I like being around people. But it's funny? Sometimes you can be around a lot of people and still feel all alone. You can kind of, it's just a real issue sometimes, especially when you're taking a biblical stand that's not a popular stand. That can really make you feel alone. And the reality is, a lot of times, our spouses and our children feel this even more so. Because guess what? They're married to that dude that they don't like, and their dad's the guy that's making their life miserable. And so a lot of times they feel that. I remember years ago, a certain guy got on one of my boys, and I mean, just let him have it. Now, Drew, let me make it clear. He was messing up. He needed correction. He needed to be dealt with. And I was for that. But here's what he said: and you're the preacher's son. And you're doing that. And I went to him and said, don't ever do that again. He said, what? I said, he knows he's the preacher's son. He lives with it every day of his life. Now, you need to clean his clock, clean his clock. Mm-hmm. You need to deal with him, deal with him. But deal with him as a young man, not as the preacher's son.
Right.
Not, he doesn't need that thrown in his face. And so, man, figure out ways for your family not to be lonely and not to feel isolated. Get them those friendships and those relationships and those outside sources of involvement and things that they need, for their proper development.
Right. And I think just to connect to the previous one, the more holy you pretend to be without accountability and honesty about where you are, the more lonely you're going to feel, because you're going to be further removing yourselves from real people who make mistakes and are real, So the more real you are, the more connectedness you can feel in community to people who are struggling just like you. And so I think there is a connection point to that loneliness.
I had a pastor's son say one of the most profound things to me recently. Where they're at's not going well right now. They're going through a difficult season. And he was talking to a lady and just said, why are you doing this? What has my dad done to deserve this? And he said, I just really want to know and understand. Mm-hmm. And she said, oh, be quiet. All you are is the son of a preacher. That's all you are. And I loved what he said back, Drew. She goes, he said, you've known me my whole life. You've watched me grow up. And the only thing you have to say to me is that I'm the son of a title. Wow. Wow. And so I was talking with him about that and helping him through that. But I mean, he was just deeply, deeply hurt because, and he told her, he says, you've watched me. You know how old I am. You know the decisions I make. There's got to be more to my life than I'm just the son of a title, you know? And so we just had to talk through that. Let me say this. Your family's going to get hurt at different times. They are. Yeah. You just need to be ready for, and not that we could ever totally be ready, but you just got to be aware it is going to happen, because hurting people hurt people, and it's going to happen to our families just like it happens to other families. And we need to remind them, hey, just because they treated you bad doesn't mean it's not worth it.
Right.
We need to remind them of that.
Yeah. No, it's so good to do that.
And so what do we do? Well, I'd say strengthen your marriage, strengthen your family. Make sure you and your spouse are having time for one another. Pray together. Spend time together. Meet one another's needs. You know, there are distinct challenges to our rhythms and the way ministry works. I mean, there can be seasons that are just so crazy busy. You and I talk about that. You're like, oh my goodness. And you're just looking for that place to get a breath, to just kind of, I know you're looking forward to some vacation time starting tomorrow, and I'm excited for you. But, you just got to make sure that you place your family first. Over ministry, not over your relationship with the Lord. Nothing's weightier than our love for Christ in our heart and our life. But then that they know, hey, I'm going to place you first, and have a date night. Schedule family time. And here's where I was going with that. Yes, there are those busy times, but we have some flexibility some people don't have. And so you go through those crazy moments and those crazy times. Man, if you have an afternoon, figure out a way to go do something with your family. If that's going to the pool or going to the lake or going and climbing Pinnacle Mountain, whatever it is that you can do as a family, just do it. And I'll say something else there, Drew. Put your family on your calendar and protect it.
Absolutely. I'll just tell you this quick little story. Well, church I served in, in Nashville. I'll never forget. It was, he was a church planter. The pastor was a church planter. And church planting, especially when you first get going, it's almost like, you're going as fast as you can. You'll do whatever you can to grab people. And I remember him saying to me when I came on, he said, hey, listen, I really don't want you to have, I want you to protect your family and make sure that you don't spend more than 4 nights a week with other people in your home.
Yes.
And I remember kind of going, 4? That sounded like a ton to me.
Yeah.
And I understand for a church planner, it's like, hey, honey, we're going to have 3 nights worth, but that's even too much. It's to be sensitive to that. What is a rhythm that, and maybe there's seasons, maybe there's times where it is 4, there's 3, or it's 2, whatever, but talk with your wife and your family and work through this together, that there are expectations that can be met and not feel like there's a trust that's broken when you do something over what's been commented on or discussed, prayed about. I'll never forget that, him saying 4 nights, me going, don't worry, I'm not going to have 4 nights with people in my home.
on that vein, Drew, it's kind of like emergencies. There are going to be times,
sure,
your wife and your kids are going to, I got to go.
Right.
But let me say this, if you're not careful, that'll become the rule, not the exception.
Right.
That everybody that jerks our chain, we got to go. And I'll just say it out loud. And I got this from Hal Seed, a good friend out in Oceanside, California. And Hal said this: it's not my responsibility to care for every single one of you. It's my responsibility to make sure you are cared for.
That'll preach.
And I just love that. And we've got to remember that. And I tell my people, listen, you're going to have to trust me sometimes that I'll step in when I really believe I need to step in. But there are others who can care for you, and there are others who should care for you. This is the body caring for the body, not one Superman caring for everybody. And the guys and leaders, listen to me, hear me. If you're not careful, you're going to build a system you cannot sustain.
That's good.
You can't do it. And when I planted those 4 nights, it was more than that when we first did it. And to be honest, that's when Shelby and I had a come to Jesus meeting, and we had to, because I turned to her and I said, when did I become a workaholic? And she just gets quiet, Drew. And I was like, honey, I kind of expected an answer, and it broke my heart, Drew. She looked at me, she goes, I'm trying to remember when you weren't. And I went, man. And that was a word I needed to hear at that moment, at that time. And because the family pressures are real, because, matter of fact, there was even a book out years ago that I don't recommend, but it's The Pastor's Wife Living in a Fishbowl, and we have all talked about glass houses. But when you're in leadership, there's a magnifying lens that concentrates and focuses and intensifies how folks are watching us. The mundane becomes more serious. Everything's just intensified, and it's just the reality that we've got to understand. So we've got to know our own limitations, and we need others to do this journey with us. Stop doing everything and start training people to help you do everything.
Yeah, that's it.
And that's just huge and key.
Yeah, I just keep thinking about this story. My wife, she grew up as a preacher's kid, and he was a godly man. He just passed over a month ago. Just a wonderfully godly, celebrated man. But there was a season as a pastor where he, all their vacations, the only time they ever did anything as a family was connected to an associational meeting or gathering. And I would just say, don't let that be the only time that you take, because your mind is in that gathering more than it is in your family. Make time for your family outside of just associational gatherings or meetings in different places that you might save money because the church is sending you. That's okay. But do other things as well, because she just talks about, we were going to someplace. I remember one time we got a call, so-and-so passed away, and the car turned around and our vacation was over. She said, I can't count how many times on my hands that happened. It's like, that breaks my heart, but it's exactly what you're saying. There are more people we are training for the work of ministry besides us. In fact, it's a blessing when we can go, hey, I'm with you, I love you, but those folks are around you and they're going to serve you, and that means you're actually doing the work of Ephesians 4 to equip people for that ministry. So I totally agree with that. It's good.
Yeah, and I know we're about to probably wrap this one up, so I want to talk about a couple other quick things. The joy of being a leader ought to be to show people what a godly marriage looks like. A lot of people have unbiblical viewpoint of how a family ought to function, and we need to show what a couple looks like, and we also need to show them what godly parenting looks like. And I can tell you, I certainly I have not been perfect in either of those. We've all made our fair share of mistakes, but I've even apologized to my kids and said, I was wrong there, and I know I was. But let me give you a cool story, because both of these couples. We were recently in Portugal, and the Sorrells were with us, Carl and Heidi, and Shelby and I, and there was a young girl in her 20s, early 20s, and towards the end of the trip, Drew, she said something blew me away. Now, we went over there to minister to them. That was the goal. And she looks at us and she goes, I got to say something. Thank you, two couples, for reinstilling my faith that marriage could work.
Wow.
I know. I was blown away. She goes, I got to tell, I won't go into everything, but I just didn't believe marriage could work. And I've watched you two couples, how you love each other, how you interact, how you really like each other. and she was just going on. And I got to tell you, the four of us were a little blown away.
Sure.
But my point here is people are watching. They are watching. And this is our opportunity to show them this is what a biblical marriage looks like. This and being authentic and being transparent. Matter of fact, I shared something from the pulpit yesterday. I did to Shelby years ago, and then I said, men, don't do that. Because that's just about the angriest I ever got her. And so don't do that. Learn from my mistakes. And so realize that, your children need you, but others need to see they're looking and they're watching, and that's not why we do it. We ought to do it because we're striving to do the right thing and then understanding the impact it can have on others.
So good. So good. And like we said in the beginning, such a needed conversation. I know we'll probably talk more on it. But let me just say this very quick as we close. Friends, if you're listening to this and you're in a situation, you're struggling with your marriage and you're struggling maybe an issue in your family, we want you to know we love you. We're praying for you, and we want to come alongside you, pray for you, and get you to the right people. If you need to have a conversation with a counselor or some other pastors or somebody that can help, we would love to help do that. And so just reach out to us, info@healthychurchpodcast.com, and we will connect you to the right folks and, more importantly, be praying for you in the middle of it. But, Larry, anything to close us before we go?
No, just reinforcing what you said. We've got some great friends. We've even had one of them on the podcast recently that do this very thing, and that could, if you need more and deeper help, could really be a blessing from a biblical, spiritual perspective.
Men and women, we love you. We're praying for you, praying for strength in your marriages and relationships, and that it honors the Lord and teaches His people what it's supposed to be like to love somebody like that. God bless you. Thanks for watching the Healthy Church podcast.
For more information and other resources, go to healthychurchpodcast.com.